Greetings to the Caron Chapel YouTube folks, and wow, I'm so grateful to be able to welcome all of you who are here for our annual reunion. I've been praying for better weather, but we'll just see how the day goes. The preparations for this occasion, the memorial service, began months ago with the music that we just heard, and one of the tasks performed by my friend and colleague June Baer is the collating of a list of names of persons that we have lost from our alumni flock in the period of time since the last time we gathered for that purpose. And I think we have 63 names to read for you later this morning. Every year it's meaningful for me, but this year it's hitting me in a really strong way. And this work that those of us who wear the corporate name badges are privileged to participate in, I think of as sacred, and I recognize that this is a part of it. And I became a bereavement professional, not that I understood my calling as that. I was just doing the math this morning, 29 years ago. I just can't believe that's true, but it is true. And I was mentored by a guy who has passed away. His name was John Mitchell. And I just want to recall a sad, silly story as a part of that. I was early in my sobriety. I say that I was coming up on 5 years of sobriety, and I had been really affected by Alcoholics Anonymous to awaken to the questions of spirituality and human life. And I had left a small business that I had been a big part of and gone to seminary. And just as I was beginning seminary, the Methodist system of which I was a part, a lot of church systems have their foolishness and craziness, but one of the things that I think is wild is that they will take a new incoming candidate, and if you can pass muster with a psychologist, so be identified as not quite crazy, they put you in service right away as a student pastor before you even get to seminary. And so you do this 2 weeks of boot camp, which was described to me by the person who led the boot camp as you're going to learn to hatch, match, and dispatch. So baptism, marriage, and funerals. And so I had hatch, match, dispatch training. And then John, my mentor, was the pastor of a really good-sized church in Seaford, Delaware, of all places. And he asked me if I could start a week early. So this would have been the last week in June in 1994. And so the last week in June in 1994, and I had planned to take 2 weeks off because I had not had a 2-week vacation in God knows how many years. And so I was a little chagrined when he asked me to start 2 weeks early. And I was like, John, I need to take at least a week, but I'll start the week before July 1st. That's the start week for everyone in that world. And I said, why? Are you going when? He goes, yes, I'm going on vacation, which is why I wanted to start 2 weeks early so I could show you the ropes. But you're going to be the pastor in charge for the first week of your ministry as a student pastor with your 2 weeks of boot camp. And I was like, okay. And naive and narcissistic and arrogant as I may be, I was like, should be fine. And they had given me a guy to call. I can't even remember his name, but he was a retired minister living in a retirement facility. So if there was a real problem, I could actually get professional help. And I was sitting in John's office, sitting at the big chair, and John and I were finishing up, and he's giving me all the last tidbits, and this is the guy to call Jervis. You can call Jervis if you have trouble. And as he was heading out the door, I said, John, and he goes, yeah, and I said, what do I do if there's a death? And he turned around, and on his way out the door, he said, bury him, and headed out the door. 3 hours later, I got a phone call, which began my work as a bereavement professional. When I came to Caron in 2008, I had presided over hundreds of funerals. And what weirdly had happened for me is I had come, like my colleague Zoe would tell you, to appreciate the work It's a privilege. It's an amazing thing to be called to be present to people in and around this mystery that happens. And so when I came to Caron in 2008, and my predecessor in this role, Father Bill, was large and in charge, one of the things that I quickly felt called to do was to initiate bereavement calls. And so since 2008, I've been the principal person tasked with making phone calls to families when we learn of alumni death. And I have sought to carry out that gift faithfully. And sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes I don't reach people, and sometimes there are other reasons why we would not get in touch. And as I said, year after year after year, it's complicated. But this year, I find myself challenged in a different way. So, and we work as a team of chaplains to be in support to one another and to talk about the work that we do, both how to help our current patients find their way to either resume or start abstinence and recovery, but also how to, support one another when we find that we have to count another among the fallen. And there are discernments that come upon the bereavement professional over time. One of which, for me, was less is more. So when I'm called to a bedside or in a phone call, my sense is that my job is more to listen than to provide answers to the timeless questions. And so here I am as an answer guy today. But also in my studies, Tina read that beautiful passage from Ecclesiastes. It's a lovely resource. There's all kinds of meaningful material, poems and songs and scriptures and narratives that people may draw upon to help one another when we lose people that we love. And the problem is not that there is an absence of things to say or an absence of material. The problem is fit. What is the right thing to say in relation to this bereavement for this person who is affected by it? And there's enough of a mystery that, if I don't want to just completely shut up and be quiet with the persons that are in my circle at that moment, another thing I've sought to do is to figure out how to elicit from the person what they're trying to say or bring out or hear. Because I also think that in us we have our own sort of inner graspings at coping with the reality of death. And for one person it may be an answer to what happens after death, or for another person it may be to celebrate. One of the things you're going to hear is a prayer that's written with a tip of the hat to the Jewish Kaddish. And the Kaddish and the Jewish tradition has made their memory be a blessing forever, which is an incredibly helpful tool in this toolkit. Because remembering people with honor is a really, really helpful piece of the whole mystery puzzle. And that's one of the things I'm hoping that I can do today, is to remember our fallen with honor and dignity. And I hope that that's a comfort to you. It's a comfort to me. But I have a testimony to also bring. My wife and I are each acquainted with a gentleman, she better than I, who recently suddenly and tragically lost his wife. Not a drug-related thing at all. But one of these kick in the pants kind of really God moments when this lovely man must go home to a house that rings with the emptiness of her absence. And my wife ran into this fellow, let's say 6 or 8 weeks after the death, and had an encounter with him, and was doing exactly what I'm talking about, trying to elicit what the need was for him to have an encounter with her. And this guy told a story about how he had been being contacted by people, and that frequently what people would say to him is, I don't even know what to say. You know, if his name was Jake. Like, Jake, I just don't even know what to say. And I say that all the time as a bereavement professional. Even in a therapeutic moment, I might say, this is not a thing to which there is an evident and clear method of response. But, interestingly, this fellow went on to say there was a person that he had known, I think it was like a military service connection, and that this guy, who had previously been connected with the now widowed husband, when he called him, was like, Jake, I just lost my wife too. So here were two people who each were experiencing tragic loss. In the other case, there had been sickness and then death, but not enough time to really like take care of whatever that doesn't fix anything. But anyway, they were not identical deaths, but there was a common bond. And what this gentleman said to Jake was, I was adrift in the not understanding and not knowing. And then it came to me that God only wants the good flowers for his garden. And this brought this man comfort in the absence of his love, was to tell himself that she needed to be in the landscape. It's not a consolation I have ever been moved to include in my reflections with people in bereavement. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard somebody say. And it turned out to be the perfect thing for this bereaved husband. So he was like, nobody has said anything to me that makes sense, except that I can now envision my wife as a flower in the garden of God. Some of you know I have a tarragon plant story. I'm not going to tell it, but it's a plants function I was completely clueless to plants as a young drug-addicted person, but I've come to appreciate. I have a dill tree, not a dill plant. I don't know how that's happened this year. It's gone into this robust thing. So if anybody needs dill, let me know. And I just had dill in a smoothie this morning, but I was moved to look up something as I was wanting to tell that story about this fellow, and then I was wanting to make the connection for us as we begin today's celebrations, which really today is a celebration. We are celebrating you. If you're a patient, that you are beginning, and we are celebrating a place that's come to be known as Magic Mountain. And each of you is a flower in Dick Caron's garden, and in Bill Wilson's garden, and in the divine creation. You are miracles, each and every one of you. And the phrase I was wondering if it had a history is, you've probably heard, bloom where you're planted. And I've discovered that apparently it's a 15th century French saying. Did you know that? I did not know that. So, fleuris là où tu es planté. And it comes from the 15th century. I don't know the writer or whatever, but I'm like, well, that's pretty cool. And it's got that beautiful roll on the tongue, as most French expressions do. And if you wanted to translate it in a more formal way, it's like, bloom ye where thou art planted. Right? And this is so what I believe is the wisdom of recovery. Because we find ourselves in soil that is mud and dark and difficult, and with the insufficient light or water and deserts. And Jesus talks about mustard seeds that get in the brambles, and that is an addict at the beginning. We are clawing at regaining the capacity to even survive. And what happens here is a kind of bizarre, wonderful freshening up of the soil in which human beings find themselves and flourishing. Like, robust, unbelievable. There's a woman over there, her first name's Holly Jane, I think, and 31 years it'll be celebrated for her tomorrow. Unbelievable, right? And there's a guy over here, Mike, I think he was here, how many years ago?
45.
45 years ago, he was a patient. So we honor our dead, we do. And I grieve along with you at their passing. But they are part of the magic of the soil that has the capacity for others to thrive and flourish. And that is our call. This is what we are to do. It's the best we can do, is to remember and honor those who have fallen and to love and serve one another and coach each other on the way, right? And you can do that. We can do that better than any other community and place that I know of. There is no better provider that I know of. If somebody asks me what to do about addiction, the first thing I want to know is how to get them into Caron. Because there is magic here, and there is faithfulness here, there is dedication here, there is competence here, and there is the secret sauce. There is something that brings about the Jack and the Beanstalk, right? Like just amazing harvest from modest beginnings. That is who you are. May God bless this reunion and the work of your day-to-day and the love that we share with each other as we survive. Thank you.